Hello everyone, wishing you all a wonderful day. Today we're diving into a shocking new chapter as the CEO's father struggles to reveal the truth behind the accident and writes one terrifying word, mother. But just when the CEO suspects his mother, a mysterious warning changes everything. Is his father accusing her or trying to warn that she may be the next target? Stay until the end to uncover the truth. And if you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episode. The CEO didn't waste another minute. The moment he received word that his father had shown signs of improvement, he left the office and drove straight to the hospital. For days, his investigation had pulled him deeper into questions he couldn't answer. A mysterious vehicle had followed him before the crash. A technician who had worked on his car had suddenly disappeared. A senior board member appeared in surveillance footage beside that same technician. And now, an anonymous message had told him something he couldn't ignore. If you want to know why you had the accident, ask your father. The words repeated in his mind all the way to the hospital. When he arrived, the hallway outside his father's room was quiet. A nurse immediately recognized him. "He's awake?" "Not fully," she explained, "but he's responding more than before." "Can he speak?" The nurse hesitated. "Not yet. His condition is still weak, but he can hear us, and we're seeing small voluntary movements." That was enough. The CEO entered the room. His father lay beneath a white blanket, thinner than he remembered. Machines quietly monitored his breathing and heartbeat. For several seconds, the CEO simply stood beside the bed. This wasn't the powerful man he remembered from board meetings. This wasn't the father who once seemed impossible to challenge. He looked fragile, human. The CEO slowly pulled a chair closer. "Father?" The older man's eyelids moved. The CEO immediately leaned forward. "It's me." His father's eyes opened slightly. There was recognition there, weak but unmistakable. "You know who I am?" The man's fingers moved faintly against the blanket. The CEO felt a wave of relief. "I need to ask you something." No response. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to listen." The father's eyes remained on him. The CEO took out his phone. He opened the traffic camera image showing the mysterious vehicle behind his car. "This car followed me before the accident." His father looked toward the screen. The heart monitor changed slightly. The CEO noticed. "You recognize it?" No answer. His father's breathing became heavier. "I also found out someone inspected my car the day before the crash." The older man's fingers twitched. "The technician disappeared after I started investigating." Another reaction. The CEO leaned closer. "Father, was something wrong with my car?" His father's mouth moved. No sound came out. "Take your time." The older man struggled again. His lips formed something, but the CEO couldn't understand. A nurse stepped closer. "Don't push him too hard." "I know." But the CEO couldn't stop now. His father knew something. He could see it. The CEO lowered his voice. "Did you know I was in danger?" His father's eyes closed tightly, then slowly opened. His index finger moved. Once, then again. The CEO's heart started pounding. "Is that yes?" The father's finger moved again. The CEO stared at him. "Someone was trying to hurt me." His father's hand trembled. No clear answer. "Was it connected to the company?" The older man's eyes shifted toward the door. That reaction was different. Fear, the CEO noticed immediately. "Who are you afraid of?" His father looked back at him. "Was it someone on the board?" Nothing. The security employee? Nothing. The technician? Still nothing. The CEO hesitated. Then he asked the question he had avoided. "Was it mother?" His father's entire expression changed. His eyes widened. The heart monitor quickened. The CEO stood. "Father?" The older man's fingers began moving urgently. "Are you trying to tell me something about mother?" His father struggled to lift his hand. The CEO grabbed it. I'm here. The older man's lips moved. One sound escaped. The CEO leaned closer. What? His father tried again. Then his strength disappeared. His hand fell back onto the blanket. The CEO froze. Was he trying to say mother? Or something else? The nurse checked the monitor. He needs rest. Just one more question. Sir, one question. The CEO looked at his father. For days, every road had somehow led back to his mother, but he couldn't accuse her based on fragments. He needed something real. Father, he swallowed. Before my accident, I was planning to leave with Tieu Lac and my daughter. The moment he said Tieu Lac's name, his father's hand jerked violently. The CEO stopped. The nurse noticed too. That was deliberate. The CEO leaned toward him. Father? The older man's index finger moved again, much stronger this time. You remember Tieu Lac? His father's eyes filled with emotion. The CEO's breathing changed. What happened to her? The father tried desperately to speak. Nothing came out. Did she have something to do with the accident? The father's eyes widened. His finger moved rapidly. The CEO couldn't tell whether he was saying yes or no. Was she in danger? Another strong movement. The CEO gripped the bed rail. Did my mother threaten her? The door suddenly opened. That's enough. The CEO turned. His mother stood at the entrance. Her expression was cold. What are you doing here? Talking to father. He's not strong enough for this. I'm asking him about my accident. Her face tightened. I know. The CEO stared at her. How? She didn't answer immediately. I was told you came. That isn't what I asked. His mother walked toward the bed. You need to leave. I'm not finished. Yes, you are. The CEO laughed bitterly. Interesting. Don't start. Every time I get close to an answer, you appear and tell me to stop. I'm protecting your father, or yourself. Her eyes hardened. The CEO continued. When I mentioned Tieu Lac, father reacted. His mother's expression changed. Only slightly, but he saw it. He tried to tell me something. He's confused. No. He can barely speak. But he understands. You're interpreting random movements because you're obsessed with your investigation. The CEO stepped toward her. Then why are you afraid? I'm not. You are. His mother looked toward the nurse. My son needs to leave. The CEO didn't move. Father tried to say something beginning with M. Her eyes immediately shifted toward the bed. That tiny reaction was all the CEO needed. You know what he was trying to say. Leave. Tell me. Now. The CEO looked at his father. The older man's eyes were open again, watching them. There was desperation in them, but also something else, a warning. The CEO slowly stepped backward. Fine. His mother seemed surprised. I'm leaving. He looked directly at her. But I'm not stopping. Then he turned and walked toward the door. His mother followed him into the hallway. Neither noticed what happened behind them. The nurse turned toward the medical equipment. The father's hand slowly moved beneath the blanket. His entire arm trembled from the effort. He couldn't speak. He couldn't call out. But he had heard every word, and he knew his son was looking in the wrong direction. Slowly, painfully, his index finger began tracing letters against the white blanket. One stroke, then another. Again. Again. Until a single word appeared in shaky lines. Mother. The father's eyes filled with fear, but no one was looking anymore. Part 2. The CEO stopped in the hallway just outside his father's room. His mother stood a few steps behind him. Neither spoke at first. The hospital corridor felt colder than before. The CEO's mind kept returning to the same moment. His father's reaction when he heard Tieu Lac's name, the sudden movement of his hand, the failed attempt to speak, that broken sound. And then his mother's immediate arrival, too immediate. The CEO slowly turned around. "You knew I was coming here." His mother crossed her arms. "I was informed." "By who? Does it matter?" "Everything matters now." She looked tired. "You're turning every detail into a conspiracy." "Maybe because every detail keeps leading back to the same people." His mother's expression hardened. "Be careful. There it is again." "What?" "That warning." The CEO stepped closer. "You keep telling me to be careful. My father tells me nothing. People disappear. Records go missing. My car was followed, and now the moment I ask about Tieu Lac, father reacts like he's trying to warn me." His mother's jaw tightened. "Tieu Lac has nothing to do with your accident." "Then why did father react?" "He's recovering from a serious medical condition." "You saw his hand move." "I saw a weak man being pressured by his son." That hurt, but the CEO didn't back down. "I'm trying to understand what happened to my life, and I'm trying to stop you from destroying what's left of it." He stared at her. "That's exactly what you said before, isn't it?" His mother froze. The CEO suddenly felt pressure behind his eyes. Another memory surfaced. A large office. His mother standing near the window, her voice shaking with anger. "If you keep pushing this, you'll destroy everything." Then his own voice. "Maybe some things deserve to be destroyed." The CEO grabbed the wall. His mother immediately moved toward him. "Are you okay?" He pulled away. "Don't." Her hand stopped. He looked at her. "You said those words before the accident." She went pale. "What words?" "That I was destroying everything." Silence. "You remember?" "Not enough." The CEO's voice lowered. "But enough to know this isn't the first time you've tried to stop me." His mother looked toward the room. "You were reckless." "About what?" "I can't discuss this here." "Then where?" "At home." "No." Her eyes flashed. "You don't trust me anymore." The CEO said nothing. That silence answered for him. Inside the hospital room, the nurse adjusted the monitor beside the CEO's father. His finger was still resting on the blanket. The faint lines he had traced were barely visible now. "Mother." He tried again. His hand shook. This time the nurse noticed. "Are you trying to write something?" The older man's eyes widened. His finger moved urgently. The nurse leaned closer. Slowly, he traced the first letter again. M. Then O. The nurse's expression changed. Before he could finish, the door opened. The CEO's mother returned. "What is it?" The nurse straightened. "He seems to be trying to communicate." The mother's eyes dropped toward the blanket. For half a second, her entire face changed. Fear. Then control returned. "He needs rest." The nurse hesitated, but he was writing something. "His hand is spasming." The father's eyes filled with frustration. He tried to lift his hand again. His wife immediately took it. "Enough." The CEO's father stared at her. The moment their eyes met, something silent passed between them. The nurse sensed it, but she didn't understand. The mother leaned close to her husband. "Please stop." His breathing became heavier. "You're going to hurt yourself." His finger moved inside her hand. She tightened her grip. The nurse frowned. "Mom, don't restrain his hand." The mother released him. "Of course." Outside, the CEO was already calling his trusted employee. "I need every hospital visitor record for my father." "Since when?" "Start with the last month." "Sir, why?" "Because I want to know who's been coming here." "Understood." "And check whether my mother has requested any restrictions on visitors or medical information." The employee paused. "I'll look into it." The CEO ended the call. His mother stepped into the hallway again. "You really don't know when to stop." He looked at her. "I learned that from you." She sighed. "You think I'm your enemy. I don't know what you are." Those words hit harder than he expected. For the first time, she looked genuinely wounded. But the CEO couldn't afford to let emotion replace questions. Why did you lie to Tieu Lac? She looked away. Why did you tell her I chose the family over her? I've answered this. No, you've avoided it. He moved closer. Was it because you wanted her gone? Yes. The honesty surprised him. The CEO said nothing. His mother continued, I wanted her gone. Why? Because once she became part of your life, you stopped thinking about consequences. My daughter was a consequence. Don't twist what I'm saying. Then say it clearly. Her voice broke for the first time. I was afraid of losing you. The CEO stared at her. To Tieu Lac. To everything. She looked exhausted now. You were fighting with the board, fighting with your father, fighting with me. You were investigating things you didn't understand. What things? Her face closed again. There. The CEO pointed at her. You almost told me. I said too much already. Mother. No. She turned away. The CEO grabbed her arm. Was the accident connected to what I was investigating? She slowly looked at his hand. He released her. She whispered, Go back to Tieu Lac. The CEO froze. What? Take your daughter. Stay away from the company for a while. His suspicion immediately deepened. Yesterday, you wanted me back in the city. Things have changed. What changed? She didn't answer. Did someone threaten you? Silence. Did someone threaten father? Her eyes shifted toward the hospital room. That was enough. The CEO's voice dropped. Who? I can't tell you. You can. No. Why? Because you don't remember what happened the last time you knew. The CEO went completely still. The last time he knew. His accident. The meaning was obvious. You think if I find the truth, he paused, someone will come after me again. His mother looked away. She didn't deny it. Before he could ask another question, the nurse rushed out of the room. Sir, the CEO turned. Your father is agitated. He immediately went inside. The older man was breathing heavily. His right hand moved weakly across the blanket. The CEO approached. Father. His father's eyes locked onto him. Then his finger began moving, slowly, painfully. The CEO watched carefully. M, then O, then T. The CEO's breathing stopped. His mother entered behind him. The father's hand continued, H-E-R. The CEO stared at the blanket. Mother. He slowly turned toward her. His mother's face had gone completely pale. What is he trying to tell me? She said nothing. The father suddenly moved again. His finger traced something beneath the word, not another word. A line. Then another. Like an arrow, pointing toward the door. The CEO frowned. Mother, what? His father shook his head weakly. Then he looked past the CEO, past his wife, toward the hallway. The CEO followed his gaze. A man in a dark suit stood at the far end of the corridor, watching the room. The moment their eyes met, the stranger turned away. The CEO immediately ran toward the door. Hey! The man disappeared around the corner. The CEO chased him down the corridor. By the time he reached the elevator, the doors were closing. He caught only a glimpse of the stranger's face. But it was enough. The CEO had seen him before, in the old security footage. The senior board member standing beside the technician who had inspected his car. The elevator doors closed. The CEO stopped. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. A new message appeared. Your father isn't warning you about your mother. A second message followed. He's warning you that she is next. The CEO rushes to the hospital after learning that his father has begun responding. Weak and unable to speak, his father reacts strongly when the CEO mentions Tieu Lac and the night of the accident. He desperately tries to communicate, but the CEO's mother suddenly appears and orders him to stop asking questions. Suspicious, the CEO begins wondering whether she is protecting him or hiding something dangerous. Later, his father slowly writes one word on the blanket: Mother. At first, the CEO believes this may confirm his worst suspicions. But the situation changes when his father points toward the hallway, where a mysterious senior board member is secretly watching them. The man quickly escapes, and an anonymous message reveals a terrifying twist. The father was not accusing the CEO's mother at all. He was warning that she could become the next target.